Hello, everybody. I'm really excited. There's some really cool stuff happening in the Quasar world right now. I'm currently working on a secret project, and I wanted to do a little bit of a podcast talking about some of the stuff I've been discovering over the past, few months that I'm now starting to implement in this secret project that I am super excited about. Oh, let me just add one more thing to my notes here. Yes, we definitely want to talk about that too. Now, if you haven't already, check out quasarcomponents.com. A lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about today, I'm thinking about doing some bonus videos on quasarcomponents.com when that course is released. And it's going to be released very soon. I'm just waiting from an okay from someone on the team, I'm waiting to get all of the shirts in as well. So I've ordered a shirt for me and for Nicolo. Nicolo's done the design. We're going to put it on, check that it's actually good. We like the quality of it, and if we do, then we're going to commit to that design for the shirt and to that quality of shirt, and then we can basically start opening things up, and I can start selling, which is really excited. So hey, check out quasarcomponents.com if you haven't already. I think you'll actually be blown away by the price and how much value you'll get there. Anyway, so I'm working on this secret project. I wish I could tell you what it is, but I just need to wait for a few sort of okays from people on the team. But one of the things I've been doing is exploring using the composition API to basically make my life easier. And I've been doing this at work as well. And one of the guys I work with, Pat, he's done an amazing job abstracting some concepts using the composition API. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about, all of the credit really goes to him. Some of it I've thought up myself, but it's kind of been like a back and forth between both of us. So I don't want to make out that, a lot of this is just coming from my brain. All right, so what I want to talk about is the concept of, and I'm going to call it services. I don't know if that's the right name for this, but using composables as services. Now, I'll give you examples from the ground up so that you can kind of see how this works really well for abstracting a lot of your code. So there's a website called, or a package called, let me just find it. It's called Viewcomposables. And this is a really cool package that basically offers a bunch of composables so you can access different APIs using the composition API. It is absolutely wonderful. So it makes it really easy to work with things like, I'm going to scroll down here, like scrolling. They've got one, mouse distance from element, dealing with dates, dealing with formatting things, stuff like that. Oh, here's another good one, cookies, web storage, session storage, basically creating an API that makes it really easy to access this kind of thing. And taking advantage of like view reactivity, computer properties and stuff like that to make it even easier. They've even got one for pagination. But the one that I'm particularly interested in is the Axios one. So what it allows you to do is very easily create an instance of Axios, and then with that instance, you can then make your request, and you're going to have a whole bunch of reactive properties you can then tap into, like seeing whether that request is loading or not, knowing what the errors are on that request, knowing whether or not you have errors on that request. I actually go one step further, and I've sort of wrapped it and made it so that I can even see if it's a 422 response, and if it is, then I know there's going to be an error bag, and I can have a look at the error bag and actually easily then access the error bag. So basically, you end up with this single object with reactive properties that will tell you things like what the data is, whether or not there are errors, whether or not it's currently loading. And that's so cool because it means you can easily model that data directly on your component. So you do something like this. You say like, my request or my Axios is equal to use Axios. So if you're used to using something like Vuex, it's the same concept where you say like use Vuex or whatever. So you say use Axios, you'll make your request, and whilst that request is happening, you already have access to things like loading. So you can say my Axios.loading to see if it's loading, my Axios.error. To see if there's any errors, and you can kind of dig into that error object there. My Axios.isCancelled to see if that request was cancelled. So, hopefully you kind of see, it's kind of hard to explain this. You sort of have to like look at the code. But the point I'm making is it abstracts a lot of these things that we do over and over again. So I don't have to track whether or not that request is loading anymore. So you know how you used to say, for example, ref loading, or with the old API, you'd say like loading is equal to false. And then you'd say, you do the request and you'd say loading is equal to true. And then when the request is done, you'd say loading is equal to false and do all that crap. You don't have to do it anymore. It's all just done for you and you model it directly on your template. So it's just wonderful. All right, so that's basically the premise of what I'm talking about. Giving yourself access to these services. I think of them as services. The Axios service, right? So if I say, hey, Axios service, make this request, and then it's going to give me all of that information. All right, so that's the first thing. Next, I wrapped that Axios service in what I call use API. So we'll call this an API service. So now I can do stuff like create, read, update, delete, search, all that kind of stuff can now sit directly on the use API service, and it uses the Axios service behind the scenes. So the cool thing about this now is I can say use API to abstract one level further. And I could say, for example, use API and then make a request to, this isn't for create, read, update, delete. This is just for API requests, like direct access to the API. And that basically gives me an instance of Axios that I can then, it's similar to what I was talking about before, but now I have an instance of Axios that automatically does like the authentication token stuff. And anyway, just like crap like that is all handled for you. So it's kind of just an extra abstraction on Axios for when I'm communicating with the API. So now I've created another composable that uses use API, and that is use Repo, all right? So we've got Axios, with its functionality is extended by API. API's functionality is extended by Repo. And what Repo does is it allows me to pass through a model. So I'll pass this a model, and then I can call create, read, update, delete, search on that model. And it uses use API, and use API uses use Axios. So hopefully you can see how the composition API makes it really easy for me to abstract further and further out here. Now it gets even better. Now, I'm going to use another one called use model, right? So what'll happen is I can say use model and use that in order to, which will then use the repo, which uses API, which uses Axios, right? But the cool thing about use model is it not only makes the request for the data, it also gives me the modeled data afterwards. So that data that I got back, I can easily access it as like a reactive property. And I can start doing stuff directly on the model. And I'm using VuxORM for this. So this just means that I get a whole bunch of VuxORM related stuff. So then I can start like filtering it and doing cool stuff like that as well. But then there's another one called use model collection, right? Which is basically the same concept, but it gives me a collection of models. And so yeah, the cool thing about this is the composition API has made it ridiculously easy to create these abstraction layers, to create these sort of separations of concern that were really difficult to do in the past before the composition API. And all the type hinting is just wonderful that you get on top of this. And just to kind of drive this home, another thing that Pat did is he created a use errors that is now used for different services. And he's basically separated the concept of errors from Axios. So when you're doing an Axios request, you'll get errors, but if there's some other error inside of your code, we can use that use errors concept in other places throughout our code as well. And the cool thing about that is if you want to show errors on the screen, they don't just have to be an Axios related error or like a backend request related error. They could be errors for anything in your code, which is really, really cool. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. Obviously, this is going to make so much more sense when I actually do a tutorial series on this, which I'm super excited about. And so if you want to be the first on top of all this kind of stuff, then check out quasarcomponents.com. Look, I am just so excited. We are running hard in the Quasar community now. Things are going. Things are happening. And so I really can't wait to show you the secret project that I'm working on. We're about to get a Quasar News podcast. Quasar Cast is doing really well. We're getting consistent subscribers there, which makes me so happy. It's like I'm doing nothing now, but they're starting to come in. People are signing up for quasarcomponents.com, so they're excited, to see basically to get education on Quasar. And the Quasar education scene is really starting to blow up. So I'm super excited. The hype is real. It's not just hype. Stuff really is happening. So thank you so much for following along with my journey. Do check out quasarcomponents.com, and I will see you in a future podcast. Well, I guess I won't see you, but you'll hear me in a future podcast. And please do remember, and I really mean this, there is nothing you can't build. Bye for now.